Will the protests lead to a second wave? Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I've got my stein of coffee, and I thought we'd have a look at this news.com.au article, which is discussing the protests which are occurring around Australia in the last few days, and asking the question of whether it will lead to a second wave of the pandemic. Now, if you jump to trading economics, you can see here they have the rather depressing information about the coronavirus pandemic that is going around the world. The number of cases that's changed on a daily basis, the number of deaths, and the number of recoveries. We can see here, let's have a look at cases. We'll go more. You can bring it up and get an overview of every country in the world. Right now we're sitting at 7,251, not that many. The US are leading at 1.8 million, and then you've got Brazil at 600,000, then Russia at 450, and, well, there have been a lot of cases. Now the question is, will these protests that are occurring in Australia push up our number of cases? Because we have been quite resilient to this pandemic. We've had very strict economic lockdowns, and there will be economic fallout resulting from that. But the death case has not been as high as other nations. The number of infections has not been as high. So the question will be, think about it. If you compare New York with a huge population in a very tight area, different climate, different weather, different diet, and a lot of people packed together, one could argue that could potentially have a part to play in the much higher rate of infection compared to Australia with a much lower density of living, much more outdoor lifestyle. What do you think? So have our restrictions been necessary? Have the lockdowns, even the border closures, have they been necessary, or have they been an overreaction? And here's the question I will put to you. We will see what happens out of these protests. These protests are a real-life example where you've got large people defying the lockdowns to express their political opinions, and if you agree with it or disagree with it, that's another topic. But the point is, this is a lab case. Not even a lab case, this is a real-world test. So we'll see in 2 weeks' time if we get a huge spike in coronavirus cases. And then, if we don't, maybe the states need to open up their borders. Maybe the restrictions haven't been necessary. That's what we need an investigation into as well, because there's been significant economic harm. People's lives have been disrupted. People's businesses have been destroyed just due to these lockdowns. So let's have a look. Australian health authorities say they'll know soon whether massive rallies in Australian cities create clusters of pandemic cases. Health authorities are waiting to see if Saturday's Black Lives Matter protests across the nation have undermined the containment of the pandemic or COVID-19 in Australia. Just a handful of new cases were reported on the weekend, but it will be nearly a fortnight before it is known if there are any spikes in cases as a result of the rallies where social distancing was almost impossible. But there's one thing to consider. These rallies were held outdoors. They were held outdoors, guys. So that makes a point of difference. Deputy Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly said while he can understand why people joined the protests, health authorities now have to be on extra alert. We don't know if anyone in those mass gatherings was infected or infectious, and so it'll be a wait-and-see approach, Professor Kelly told reporters in Canberra on Sunday. I was encouraged to see the face masks yesterday. Those people were doing the right thing. I thought face masks don't make any difference. I don't see any face masks here at all. In Sydney, not one. Oh, well, yeah, right there. They take them off when they yell. I'm sure that's how they work. You just have to wear it down. And of course, she's got purple hair. Come on, you can't get any more stereotypical. Seriously. In terms of potential outbreaks relative to the protest, it really will be at least a week and probably closer to 2 before we have any idea whether there's been any transmissions or outbreaks related to that, Dr. Van Diemen said. 20,000 people also marched in Sydney and crowded rallies in Brisbane and Adelaide and some regional cities and towns despite public health warnings. So you've got people active and willing to protest this, but how much media attention was it people protesting the lockdowns or the restrictions on our freedom? And then a few people and the police arrest them. How many people have been fined? It's because there are too many of them. That's the thing. If you can get the mob behind you, the state can't step in. The same thing happened with Uber. There's too many of them. The police couldn't enforce it, and then suddenly it became legal. It became all in our best interest. Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt hopes the rallies that clearly broke the social distancing rules will not lead to a new wave of infections. Well, if they don't, then that proves that we don't need the lockdowns anymore. They can instantly open the borders. That's the argument I would make. All the restrictions on businesses can be removed. Don't you think? So in 2 weeks' time, we will know if the economy can jump back, be switched back on, if the restrictions can be eased. Or it may be the second wave that many people were concerned will impact the economy even further. So if there is someone who is infectious in the midst of a crowd like that can have a catastrophic impact, Mr. Hunt told ABC Radio. I mean, look, bloody hell. Look at that. Look at that number. And I'd imagine most of these people will be the ones advocating for lockdowns, all raging lefties. What do you think? Labour, the Australian protest in solidarity with African-American George Floyd, who died while being arrested in Minneapolis, also showed support for the Aboriginal community to highlight high levels of Indigenous incarceration and deaths in custody. I mean, I've seen the footage of what happened to him, and it's horrific. It doesn't make sense. Well, police officers restrain people, and they've been given the authority by the state to use violence where no one else can. But they seem to have had him under control, didn't they? We'll have to see. So the outrage is understood. The issues with Aboriginal deaths in custody, I would hope that also raise issues about just how terrible a lot of the programs we've implemented have been in actually bridging the gap. It's quite depressing when you look at the numbers, look at the investment, and look at how little has been achieved. I think the worst thing that the Western world has done to the Indigenous Australians has been introduce them to our modern diet, guys. You look at photos of them, 50, 100 years ago, they were skinny, healthy, fit people. Now, they're suffering, in some cases, worse than Westerners. So, Labour has attacked Finance Minister Matthias Cormann for labelling the protesters in Australia as being reckless and self-indulgent during a pandemic. Well, we're meant to have a lockdown, aren't we? Aren't we all meant to be in this together? What else would you call this? What would Labour say to those people that protested the lockdowns? Did they say anything? I don't remember. Opposition Indigenous Australian spokeswoman Lindy Burney described Senator Cormann's comments as tone-deaf and politically expedient. Australia has now had around 7,260 cases confirmed, and the death toll remains at 102. 102 in the entire nation, and yet we've locked down the entire economy. Worldwide, there have been at least 6.8 million and nearly 400,000 deaths. The ACT recorded its first case of the pandemic in over a month, a male aged in his 40s who recently returned from overseas. This is the thing. I think the biggest risk to Australia is just the international borders. But ACT health official Karen Coleman is confident there has been no risk to the broader ACT community. Why not? If this can occur with no risk, then open the economy. It's that simple. Restrict the lockdowns right now. The case is, however, a good reminder of the ongoing pandemic and the need for our community to continue to observe physical distancing and hygiene measures, and for people to stay home if they're unwell, Dr. Cormann said in a statement. There were also 4 new cases of the pandemic of coronavirus in Victoria. One is a household contact linked to an outbreak last month at a McDonald's restaurant in Fawkner, and the other 3 are returned travellers in hotel quarantine. There you go. But Western Australia, South Australia and Queensland all remained blank sheets, as did New South Wales for a second day in a row. But Queensland is undertaking contact tracing for a Melbourne man who arrived to pick strawberries in Bundaberg and was confirmed on Saturday. Meanwhile, the Morrison government is extending some of the measures in its $1.2 billion support package for the aviation sector to ensure the industry is sustained during the pandemic. Well, if we can have gatherings this big, we can open the economy. Can't we? Can someone explain to me why we can't? Perhaps, there's been an overreaction. Perhaps there's something different and special about Australia. So we've kept the aviation sector going by funding minimum networks to get essential personnel and critical support to those in need. So, there we have it, guys. There we have it. So it'll be interesting to look at the actual potential economic implications of these protests. If they will result in reduced restrictions, if there'll be more calls for that, or if there will be a second wave coming from this. What do you think will happen, guys? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Did you attend the protests? Or did you stay home and watch? Did you get your face mask on and dye your purple hair to get there? We'll have to see. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and you want to support the content, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel here on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay or Independent Reserve and Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays. You can use the Gold Pass from Perth Mint or support us via PayPal. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.